We all remember the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, right? Those that weren't actually held that year but in 2021 because of an unprecedented global pandemic. Okay, turns out that coronavirus wasn't the only thing spreading like wildfire and possibly compromising the games. There was also a huge ring of corruption. To be more precise, 3 of them. But don't panic, I'll explain this all in detail. I'm Kay, and this is Japan This Week. Welcome back. The Tokyo Olympics scandal has been one of the hottest topics in Japan for the past few months, but to explain what happened properly, we have to go back a little bit. As you all know, the Summer Olympics are held every 4 years in a different country. The International Olympic Committee usually takes this decision 7 years in advance, after the interest countries make a bid and provide various reassurances on the safety and viability of their projects. Problem is, apparently this process is not transparent at all, and there has been a number of investigations surrounding the events, which bring us to the first alleged criminal project. In 2015, French prosecutors started investigating Lamine Diack, member of the IOC and former Olympics power broker, on suspicions of corruption and other charges. On March 30, 2020, Reuters reported that apparently the French investigators found out that Diack had been lobbied and corrupted in 2013 through a Singaporean consultant by Haruyuki Takahashi about Japan's bid for the 2020 Olympics, one of the top priorities of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's cabinet. And I'm not saying this just to say. Haruyuki Takahashi is the former senior managing director of Dentsu Group Inc., the top advertising agency in Japan, which connections to the government have been so tight that the New York Times referred to it as the unofficial communication department of the LDP. Let's keep that in mind as we look at all this, shall we? Later, Takahashi became an executive of the Tokyo's organizing committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. According to bank records seen by Reuters, Takahashi donated more than $6 million through the Dentsu Group to the Tokyo's campaign to host the 2020 Olympics. These activities in themselves are already a potential conflict of interest, since the Dentsu Group had already a separate contract with the IOC to market the games, as told to the investigators in 2016 by senior Dentsu executive Kiyoshi Nakamura. The group was appointed by the IOC to coordinate the applications from potential sponsors, and therefore it would have gained a lot from having the games hosted in its own country. Having a central role in planning and promoting the games, according to the IOC itself, Dentsu raised a record amount of more than $3 billion in corporate sponsorships for the event, in that way collecting huge commissions on the amounts paid by the sponsors. Let's put a pin on that for now, alright? Dentsu was coordinating the sponsors of the Tokyo Olympics. It'll be useful later. After these revelations, Japanese prosecutors seized the moment and started an investigation of their own, uncovering the proverbial Pandora's vase. But before we dive into that, a small parenthesis. The IOC regulations at the time of the events allowed for gifts of nominal value to the committee members, but they didn't specify the maximum amount they can be worth. This really sheds a grim light on the fairness and legality of this all, and begs the question, how many other bids might have been unfairly approved? Let's not forget that the Olympics business is huge, and when I say huge, I mean huge, despite what the IOC itself reports. According to them, for instance, between 2005 and 2008, the events generated a revenue of $5.5 billion. But more transparent and accurate research by valuation specialist Brand Finance in 2012 indicates that the whole business is worth around $47.5 billion, between how much Google and Apple were worth at the time. This makes very clear how a country's bids and all the sponsorships involved are incredibly sensitive to any kind of criminal effort. And this takes us to our second alleged case of corruption, for which we have to introduce another character, Hironori Aoki. Aoki is the former chairman of Aoki Holdings Inc., a businesswear company, and apparently he bribed Takahashi with around 45 million yen to become an official event sponsor. Aoki applied for the sponsorship in 2017, supposedly after Takahashi himself suggested it. According to sources of the Asahi Shimbun, the same year, Aoki signed a contract with a Tokyo-based consultancy firm headed by Takahashi and paid a monthly retainer of 1 million yen for roughly 4 years, for a total of about 45 million yen. Unsurprisingly, in 2018, Aoki Holdings was selected as an official supporter, the lowest tier of sponsorship. At first, Takahashi acknowledged receiving the money, but declined to give a full accounting of how he used it. Therefore, investigators thought those were bribes, and in late July 2022, searched both Takahashi and Aoki's homes and the advertising agency Dentsu. After the search, new allegations emerged on how Takahashi supposedly took a cut of 230 million yen out of the 750 million that Aoki paid in Olympic sponsorship fees, which were supposed to go entirely to the organizing committee. In a voluntary interrogation, Takahashi admitted that he kept most of the money as a reward, because that's what he said, from Aoki for a previous sponsorship contract they had, and used 70 million of the 230 as a donation to 2 sports associations, which he performed through ADK Holdings Inc., yet another advertising agency. Do you see the picture that is forming here? If you don't, well, investigators apparently did, because after raiding the Dentsu offices in July, they widened their scope, which takes us to the third corruption ring. The top 3 advertising agencies in Japan are in order Dentsu, Hakuhodo DY Holdings Incorporated, and ADK Holdings, which are now all subject to investigation by Japan's Fair Trade Commission. On November 21st, investigators launched a probe seeking to prove the widespread bid rigging of the rights to organize the Olympic Games' test events. The test events are preparatory competitions that are held before the actual broadcasted games, with the intent of reviewing and ensuring good conditions and sufficient safety. In order to decide who would be planning the test events, the organizing committee holds bids, and in this case, the investigators suspect the bidders conspired to decide in advance who would win what, most likely violating Japan's anti-monopoly laws. This seems to be supported by a series of curious coincidences. First and foremost, many of those working on that committee originally came from the companies that were making the bids, like Takahashi, remember him? The former senior exec of Dentsu Inc. Now, here's the thing. As I said before, Dentsu was in charge of coordinating and assigning the sponsorships. And what a coincidence, among the bid winners, there were also 2 other major advertisements firms, ADK and Daiko Advertising. Apparently, according to Japan Times sources, prior to the bidding process, the committee and Dentsu had created a list of companies itemized according to their respective experiences in each sport, and then made arrangements with the companies themselves asking if they were interested in the bidding. The committee would have then disregarded the bidding process and negotiated contracts with these companies. And it's interesting to notice that the companies who won the bidding for the test events were also put in charge of the actual competitions. All of this would make a lot of sense with what is reported by the Asahi, which alleges that in about half of the 26 competitive bids, only 1 company submitted a bid. The total price tag for the 26 contracts, which were to organize all 56 test events, amounted to around 540 million yen, around $3.84 million, with a single contract costing anywhere from around 4 to 60 million yen. After all this started to come out, prosecutors under the joint investigation by the Tokyo District Public Prosecutor's Office and the Japan Fair Trade Commission doubled down, and on November 28th, they raided 6 out of 9 companies that were awarded contracts, including the second major advertising company, Hakuhodo. And this was also the time for some panic confessions, resignations, and all the usuals. ADK Holdings reported to the Japan Fair Trade Commission that it had participated in the bid rigging after its president resigned earlier in October. So, to recap it all, the Olympics, maybe not just the Tokyo ones, were apparently plagued by widespread corruption. The International Olympic Committee was allegedly corrupted, the assignment of the event planning was rigged, and won sponsorships as well. And in all this, the key players were Haruyuki Takahashi, former senior managing director of Dentsu Incorporated, company with extremely close ties with the governing LDP, and the other major advertising firms. And this was happening in Japan, a democracy with the rule of law. Makes you think about what could be happening right now in Qatar with the Soccer World Cup, doesn't it? We will see what comes out of this, because when companies this big are involved, the Japanese government is always close by, given the alarming outreach and influence it exerts. And with government, I mean the LDP. But I'm skeptical anyone will pay any kind of price there, if there was ever any wrongdoing, that is. Furthermore, the sole authority to enforce anti-monopoly law is the Fair Trade Commission, but it normally only takes administrative actions, such as issuing cease and desist orders against companies found to be violating it. Any criminal referral will probably be up to the Tokyo District Public Prosecutors. Again, we will see. I expect a lot of other things surfacing in the coming months, but very few consequences for those involved. This was all for this episode, everyone. I kept my distance from the topic for the longest time, and it was so difficult to piece it all back together, but it was worth it. If you liked the video and if you want to support my work, please leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you so much, and see you next time.